The Third Roommate. A true story, written by myself and first posted under the name Phantasmal Poppy. Before we begin tonight, I want to let you all know that I will be slowly redoing most if not all of the videos that I have done over on my old Phantasmal Poppy channel. While I will leave that one up, since I now have a better storytelling voice and also a better audio setup, I would like to redo those in a much better quality and bring them over to this channel. So while I will be leaving that channel and those videos up, I will also be doing all of those over here as I continue to read creepypastas, short horror stories, and things that I write. That means that this channel is now open to doing all sorts of horror stories, including true ones. So by all means, feel free to send in your stories and your requests. Thank you for listening. And now, enjoy. For a while, I worked as a direct support professional. Since that term is likely to be unfamiliar to most outside the field, I basically took care of developmentally disabled adults and helped them around in their home and community. Needs varied from person to person, so I had to stay on my toes. I was stationed at one house for around a month to get me properly trained. Normally, training was completed in a much shorter amount of time, but since the actual nursing staff was being phased out, some of the clients that needed medical staff on call were about to be transferred to larger support facilities. One of my clients would be leaving with her nurse to go to her new home at the end of that month, and the other client was going to a residence closer to her other family members, so my boss saw no need in moving me right in the middle of the relocation chaos. Most of the staff that worked in the house were pretty great, and since the nurse mostly took care of the one client and the other didn't need much help, it was pretty quiet most of the time. I wasn't yet certified to administer medications, so I mostly just cooked, cleaned, and helped one of my clients exercise. During my downtimes, while the clients were watching television, I would usually sit on a sofa arm, going over creepypasta stories that I read way back in the day. You guys remember Strangled Dread? Yeah, I went over that one while I was actually working at this place. All in all, it was a good way to ease someone into the job. However, as quiet as it was, there was something that broke the tranquility every now and then, and that made me question what was going on in that house. For reference, both of these ladies were nonverbal, so neither of them could talk to me nor to each other. In addition, one lady was very low functioning, enough that she often didn't notice anyone else was in the room unless we specifically made our presence known to her. She also had the motor skills of a toddler, so she never walked very far without assistance. This meant she could go for hours either watching TV or staring off, dreaming whatever daydreams she spent nearly her whole life in. The other lady was a bit more mischievous, but she adored plopping down next to someone and listening to them tell her a story or have them dance around her during her exercises. So she was usually doing one of those things when we were not watching TV. Still, there were times during the day, usually about 3:30 in the afternoon, that they would both stop what they were doing and suddenly turn and look across the little house toward the bedrooms. Then, slowly, they would turn their eyes and heads as if they were watching someone walk across the house and down the hall toward the door at the end of it. A door we then seldom opened, but was once the preferred route to enter and leave the house. The one lady who had very little mobility would literally turn around in her big lounge chair and crane her neck as she watched this invisible thing get close, before turning her whole body around to watch it leave again. More than once, she looked like she might tumble out of her chair in her uncharacteristic excitement, so I would have to call the nurse in to help her right away. After noticing this unusual synchronized staring from these two ladies, I realized that no one else seemed to notice it, mostly because I would be the only one in the room at this point while someone else was doing laundry or going out for a smoke. The strangest thing is both would be very quiet and serious during the whole event, but after their eyes met the door for a few moments, the spell over them would break and they would go back to how they normally were, one giddy and laughing, the other wistfully gazing at whatever she had been looking at before. After the third instance of this, I started to wonder if they had their own nonverbal language and began asking questions of the nurse. The response I got was the one barely paid attention to the other, and the energetic lady seemed content to just let her roommate go unperturbed. I chalked it up as some strange coincidence. Until one night, a few weeks later. The nurse had gone to help her client get ready for bed. Mine had already been out like a light in her own room for a good half-hour, and could sleep through a hurricane, so I felt like it was okay to get what little cleaning remained done. The lights in the living room were on, but the ones in the kitchen and the hall leading to the unused door were off. I didn't need them because there was enough light in the living room to see to do the dishes. As I was finishing up, I noticed out of the corner of my eye someone walk out of the hall and into the kitchen, going straight behind me. I figured the nurse had forgotten something and come to pick it up off the counter, but when I turned around, no one was there. In fact, the person I saw had been walking so adamantly that I half expected to hear a clang as they walked into the oven, because there was very little room left behind me before the floor hit the stove. Blinking, I then realized that didn't quite look like the nurse. No, this nurse was a little bit taller than me, very slim, and had blonde hair. Whoever I had seen walk behind me was shorter, squatter, and had thick black hair. The stranger also had on what looked to be a yellow and red sweater. The nurse had been wearing baby pink scrubs her whole shift. Even though nobody could move fast enough for me not to be able to see them leave the kitchen, I figured that maybe the nurse had changed clothes, and it wasn't black hair I saw, but a hat or something. I was going to rule out the only bit of logic I had left. Sure enough, the nurse hadn't left her client's room since I last saw her. I found her looking over the client's daily paperwork and making little notes for the morning staff. Still a hatless blonde in scrubs. Of course, I asked her if she had changed clothes and snuck up on me. She, of course, looked at me like I was nuts and asked me if I was getting too tired. I wasn't. I had an energy drink only half an hour before and was still wide awake. I just looked around the house before plopping down on the couch, completely assured that whatever the clients had been watching had decided to show itself to me. Nothing else weird happened besides the clients occasionally doing their 3:30 vigil. This continued up until the week they moved. As I was helping to pack up my clients' things, I noticed a picture frame sticking out from behind the dresser. Thinking it might have fallen behind there by accident, I pulled it out and was floored. The image of a stocky woman with black hair smiled back at me. About that time, the nurse walked in with more packing tape. I turned to her, excited, and asked who the woman was. She looked at the portrait and smiled fondly. That was Alice. The nurse went on to tell me that Alice had been her former client. While she had tragically succumbed to medical issues stemming from several congenital problems, she had lived long past the time the doctors gave her, and had been very fond of my client, protective even. I asked the nurse how tall the woman had been. Since Alice had issues that prevented her from ever standing and walking straight as most people, she had been quite short. However, if she hadn't had the issues she did, the nurse guessed the woman would have come up to a few inches below my own. Exactly the height of the stranger I had seen.